recently there was a huge announcement from the Biden administration basically calling an end to the COVID-19 health emergency. Now, for a lot of people, the end of COVID has already happened. People have gone back to their normal lives and they've forgotten about COVID. But the actual legal effect of the end of the COVID public health emergency, which is slated to end May 11th, 2023, will have an effect on a lot of people, especially people who are in foreclosure or in default and who are unable to pay their mortgages. I'm going to talk about all that and how to handle that in about 5 seconds. For the past 3 years, we have had very special protections for people who are unable to pay their mortgages, people who are in default, people who needed forbearances, people who needed assistance with lowering their payments. Now, all of those protections are coming to an end on May 11th of 2023. What does that mean? That means that basically we're going back to a time pre-COVID when the banks had free rein to do whatever they wanted in terms of people who were unable to pay their mortgages. That's a big deal. Now, these protections that were put in place by the Biden administration basically stopped the eventual foreclosure wave that people were expecting when the COVID-19 emergency hit. Because of those protections, we have not had this massive wave of foreclosures because the banks have basically been unable to foreclose. They were precluded and they were stopped from foreclosing by the US government. That's ending on May 11th, 2023. So if you are in a default situation where you're not paying your mortgage, those protections are all behind the scenes, the stuff that we didn't really know about, or you knew about it, but you had to look it up. That's all going out the window. So now we're going into a new era where the banks can now start foreclosure proceedings and pretty much take people's homes without much to stop them. Now, I'm going to take you through a step-by-step guide, essentially, or a path that you can take if you are in a foreclosure situation or if you're in a default situation where you might have the best shot at saving your home. Now, this is not 100%. There's things in here that basically don't apply to everybody, but this is a good start. So pay attention. Now, the big thing that we got to talk about, and the number one step, and the thing that most people want to avoid, is you must communicate with the bank. What that means is when the bank calls you, pick up the phone, or if you're a real communicator, you pick up the phone and call the bank and say, hey, I need some help. I can't pay this. I haven't paid for a while and I'm getting letters and I need some assistance. This is a big deal. You have to communicate with the bank. The bank up to this point had to communicate with you. They don't have to anymore after May 11th. One of the protections that we had was that the banks had to try to communicate with you before they started a foreclosure. Now all they have to do after May 11th is send you a default notice, which is the way it used to be. Once that notice of default hits, foreclosures can start. So what we're going to do is we're going to call the bank. If you can't handle it, then have somebody who can, a family member, a friend, somebody who doesn't really care or that is not in a situation where it's an emotional situation, and will call the bank and help you. You must make that first move. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to ask for two things, a payoff and a reinstatement. These are two different documents, but they give you a lot of information. The payoff is basically everything you owe on the house. If you were to sell the house today, this is what you would have to give the bank in order to release the mortgage. The second document is more important if you're trying to keep the home. That's the reinstatement. The reinstatement basically states what it is that you owe up to that point in back payments. That includes all the escrow advances, all the taxes and insurance that the bank has paid on your behalf, any legal fees, any other corporate charges, late fees, and plus the interest that you haven't paid. That number is the magic number. That's your enemy. That's the thing that you need to worry about, which is the reinstatement amount. 50, 60, 70,000, whatever it is. That amount of money is the amount of money that the bank wants in order for you to keep your home. So how do we deal with that? Step 2, which is apply for a loan modification. Now, everybody says, oh, loan modification, we want loan modification. Now, remember what a loan modification is and what it isn't, okay? Loan modification is part of something called loss mitigation, which is what the special term is that the bank uses. Loss mitigations. They want to mitigate or lessen the loss. Whose loss are they talking about? Not your loss. They're talking about their loss. So when they're talking about giving you a loan modifications generally benefit the bank more than the homeowner. The homeowner, what they're getting with a loan modification is the ability to deal with that arrears. The arrears is the total amount that you owe from the payments you haven't made. So a loan modification's goal is to deal with that big amount of money and put you back on track. It is not a financial tool. And now because of the interest rates that are so high, sometimes, and actually most of the time, your payment will actually go up if you do a loan modification. However, if you must do something and you have to keep your home, obviously we want to keep our home and you don't want to sell it, then a loan modification is the path. But you have to ask for it. The banks don't have to give you a loan modification unless you apply. In the past, they had to try to give you a loan modification. That's out the window with these protections. So you have to make a direct solicitation to the bank to try to keep your home through loan modification. I've done a lot of videos on loan modification, how to apply. The trick with loan modifications is apply correctly the first time. Don't just submit a bunch of documents with no order to them. Do it properly. Now, the third step, people don't like this, but I'm going to tell you about it because this is really important. This is the break the glass in case of emergency step. If all else fails and you have your reinstatement and the reinstatement doesn't look too bad, but you don't have all the money, let's say it's $30,000 or $40,000. That amount of money is for most people a lot of money. And if you don't have $40,000 and no way of getting it through any program and the bank denies your loan modification request, or they give you a loan modification that you cannot afford, that's so much more than what you used to pay, then you can look into this emergency, which is a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Don't turn off, don't click yet. Let me talk to you about it. Let me explain to you what it is. In a Chapter 13, you can do something called a cure and maintain, which basically means you can take that lump sum, the arrears that you owe, and spread those payments out over 60 months. You have to pay your current payment, and there's a little bit more on top of that you have to pay. But for a lot of people, they can do this. They can sit down and say, I'm gonna, for 5 years, sacrifice and pay off these arrears. Remember, arrears means the total amount that you owe. The good thing about this, and this is the big thing about these cure and maintain plans, is at the end of the 5 years, you revert back to your old mortgage, your old interest rate, everything. So you don't have to take a huge new interest rate or start over on your mortgage and lose your equity. The cure and maintain in Chapter 13 is really good. It's not for everybody. There's other things, and you might not qualify. You got to talk to a bankruptcy lawyer in your area, but Chapter 13 bankruptcy is an excellent tool on dealing with mortgage default and dealing with arrears. I hope all that helps for you, and I hope that you make the best decision for you and your family. Keep watching my videos, subscribe and like, because I'm going to keep making these. I'm going to keep talking about all these subjects that people are really interested in right now.